Several years ago, we published an article entitled When Damascus Heard the Gospel. Not because we were biased against it, because obviously God was for it. And the article was published both in the newspaper and on BibleNation.org. Let me read it to you. Saul was converted to Christianity and became Paul the Apostle while traveling on the road to Damascus. The voice of the Lord himself spoke to Paul and told him to go into that city. Paul was baptized in Damascus and immediately preached to the people there. It was, after Jerusalem, one of the first cities to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. Many Christians were born again in Damascus and were then dispersed around the ancient world because of the persecutions there. Paul only just narrowly escaped by being lowered down the walls of the city in a basket of all things. Damascus has continued for over 2,000 years to have a Christian, albeit persecuted, community. At the end of World War I, the leftovers from the Ottoman Empire were divided up in the Sykes-Picot Agreement, named after the British and French diplomats responsible for the strange map lines and national boundaries on the map ever since then. The various Middle Eastern nations met in Damascus in order to discuss the possibility of a pan-Arab identity, a so-called caliphate, but it was not to be. Multiple evolutions of that idea have been attempted since then with varying measures of success and failure. Christians in the gospel of Jesus Christ have always had a marginal place in these deliberations. The purveyors of Christianity have continually been lowered from a basket or shown the back door, so to speak, from the gates of Damascus. Today, and of course I wrote this several years ago, Syrian President Assad's Alawites, a reincarnation cult, Islamic extremists, Sunni Muslims, Iranian expansionists, Shiite Muslims, Russian nationalists, former communists, and other regional powers, Saudis, Israelis, Jordanians, Iraqis, Turks, and Kurds, as well as the United States, are all represented as armed interests whose strategic flanks include the city of Damascus. The oldest continually inhabited city in the world, highlighted in Scripture since the book of Genesis, is surrounded by nuclear powers just miles away. This stare down among the nations is not likely to end well. Damascus is between a nuke and a hard place. Most Christians have fled. Once again, Damascus has had millennia of chances to receive Jesus Christ as king. Now Isaiah's prophecy of utter and instant destruction seems to be taking shape. The burden of Damascus. Behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city, and it shall be a ruinous heap. Isaiah 17:1. Perhaps it is a sign of the end times for the beleaguered Christians there, a hope for the promised return of Jesus Christ. Acts 26:20. But showed first unto them of Damascus and at Jerusalem and throughout all the coasts of Judea and then to the Gentiles that they should repent and turn to God and do works meet for repentance. Short little article that because Damascus was so much in the news the last few years. Well, today we want to talk about goodbye Damascus. Welcome to the Bible Nation podcast. The best culture is Bible culture. It's proven and it works. What are we standing up for? The ability, the freedom to do what's right as God defines that right.
God's the ultimate author of liberty.
We don't want government to stand between us and our freedom to do what is right. Welcome back. I'm Doug Levesque with the Bible Nation Society with Pastor Jason Georges and Jesse Levesque from Emmanuel Baptist Church in Corona, Michigan. And we're glad to meet with you and talk with you about things pertaining to the Bible and culture. This is an important topic. And today in the news, Damascus is first and foremost. The Israelis are bombing just outside the city of Damascus. Now, they have, in the past few years, bombed just outside the city of Damascus Iranian missile depots and things of that nature, but since the change from just at the election time where Trump was elected, we have had fruit basket upset, and it has just turned the Middle East upside down, and not just the Middle East, but Europe and even the Americas. And so having it all kind of twist and turn, it's a big question mark as to exactly what's going to happen. But the bottom line is that the Israelis are now posturing differently. They're posturing outside of their existing borders or recognized borders, and they're now saying that for the immediate period in the future that they are going to be on the outskirts of Damascus, and they're not going to allow any terrorist or new Syrian army to be in there. They more or less have annexed everything up to the city of Damascus and all the way out to the Jordanian border where the U.S. Army is. So it's almost like they've touched up with the American Army east of Damascus and north of Amman, Jordan. So somehow the news never kind of shows the map on that. But the Israelis are calling that the Davidic Road or the Davidic Line. And it's interesting, and that's why I want to bring it up today, because there's a promise in the Old Testament that says that greater Israel will be from the Euphrates River all the way to the Nile River. And, of course, the Israeli army has been on the outskirts of all that time and again, but it seems like with the U.S. Army there, that all of a sudden this line is something that the Israelis are excited about. So, Pastor Jay, welcome. Congratulations. Going to another state championship. It's probably not as big a news as Israel taking Damascus, but to the girls it is, I think. To the girls it is.
To about 20 of us.
To about 20 of us, it's like top shelf.
20 of us. Hey, 3 years in a row.
3 years in a row. That's good. It's a three-peat.
Well, 3 years in a row to the state championship.
Oh, okay.
We're going to try to make it 2 for 3 in there.
2 for 3.
But we are the Hoosier school in this one.
Yeah, you're the little school.
We're the little school.
Playing a good school.
I'm trying not to be the Buffalo Bills of state championships.
Those of you who don't remember, like be younger, Buffalo Bills went to 4 Super Bowls in a row and failed.
Against the Cowboys.
Against the Cowboys.
Yeah, against the Cowboys.
But nevertheless, that was before the Patriots were good in the AFC.
Yeah, it was Chip Kelly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was Chip Kelly. So they were a good team. They threw the ball out there. But anyways.
But talking about Damascus,
yeah.
you know, you in your article that you wrote, how many years ago did you write that?
I mean, that has to be 3-4 years ago.
So you made a reference to Genesis. And of course, you know, Damascus is first mentioned in Genesis with Abraham's servant, Eliezer.
Yeah.
And so he's a friend of Abraham.
Yeah.
So when Damascus begins as a friend of Israel.
Yeah.
He's Abraham's servant.
Yeah.
And Abraham relies on him.
Yeah.
And he serves his master well.
Yeah.
And now here we are, you know.
I mean, all the way back to the pages of Genesis, Damascus is the first mentioned, one of the first mentioned cities that is settled and occupied by human beings, and yet it continues today.
Yeah, it's a historic. I'd love to go one day.
It's like God.
It's an ancient city.
Our friend Phil Stringer has gone there, and he said under the Assad regime, he was allowed in, but he was followed, and there was a very strict, rigmarole of what he could do, what he couldn't do. But there was still Christians in Damascus and outside Damascus, in Syria, and so that's why we wrote that article years ago, because it was in the news then. And we looked at that verse that Isaiah prophesies about Damascus is basically gone in a day. It's a heap of ruins. And so we could kind of imagine it back then, but now it's become the front line.
Yeah. It's a focal point of prophecy.
Yes.
So we desire to be watchers. Yeah. You can't watch the entire horizon simultaneously.
Yeah.
You got to fix your eyes in a couple of spots. Yes. And so we look at the scriptures to tell where should we fix our gaze? Where should we look? So we look to Jerusalem. We pray for the priests of Jerusalem. And then we look towards Damascus. Yeah. And really, Jerusalem and Damascus are about the two epicenters, if you want to say, of biblical prophecy. If we're just kind of, seeing what's going on and watching them.
Somehow it's biblically a front line in prophecy, but all of a sudden it matches up today. And I mean, it was there. We talked about it a couple years ago, but today it has become the front line in the last 30 days.
Well, and what an endorsement for the Bible. And a little side here. Yeah. That two ancient cities that are prophesied to be relevant till Christ returns.
Yeah.
And they're ancient, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's cities that have come and gone that are nowhere to be found. Yet these two ancient cities are still very relevant and in the news. Are in the news today. I mean, they're going to be if the Lord should tarry, they're going to be around longer than Washington D.C.
Yeah.
And so and
they become more relevant than Washington.
Yeah, and so here is, what proof? Believe the Bible.
Yeah.
Believe the Bible. I mean, here it is.
And we always are praying for Christians in Israel because the Jews aren't fond of Jesus or the Christians. But we got to pray for Christians that are holding their own, in Gaza, in Damascus, in places like that. So basically, the HTS, which is an Arabic name, I'm not going to try to pronounce it, but it's basically the Al-Qaeda of northern Syria. They've existed for years. They've kind of been marginalized because you've got Turkish troops up on the Turkish border that have basically occupied part of northern Syria. You got American troops there in several positions on the eastern border. And you've got Hezbollah running through. You've got Russia in there, particularly on the coast, protecting the Assad regime. And so they were marginalized, but they always had one or two heels in in a couple of places, and all of a sudden, with some help from Turkey, apparently, they see their opportunity and they strike. And inside of a week, Assad runs back to Moscow, and they own the main highway, the main cities, and they take Damascus. And everybody cheers because Assad is gone and the prisoners are released, etc., etc. But immediately they say, "But this is Al Qaeda," and so this leader, what's his name? I think I have it here in my notes somewhere. Ahmad al-Sharaa. Ahmad al-Sharaa. Now he has a more secular name, but he's been made the president somehow, and he's appealing to the UN and to Europe and everybody else to stop sanctions and help our country get back. And he actually has said out loud, I want, even though he's of a religious nature, he said, "I want a secular government." Now, obviously, that's kind of poppycock, because while all of the militias have been returned to the army, and the army now is the only one that can be armed, there are still HTS elements south of Damascus. And that's why Israel has struck in the last couple of days. They said there were arms depots, there were soldiers, there were officers that have been observed, and they basically said this is a non-military zone. Now, people are criticizing Israel because how's it non-military if you're bombing it? Because it's non-military for everybody who's an enemy of Israel.
Right.
And so they've successfully bombed that. Now, Jay, I don't know if you remember, when HTS took over, Israel kind of quietly went in, and in a couple of days, they destroyed every tank, every plane, every airbase, all the Navy. They destroyed the whole Syrian army infrastructure in a couple of days. They were criticized for it, but everybody's like, yeah, why wouldn't you? It was all just kind of left there. So Syria is kind of this eclectic hodgepodge quilt of who's whatever under this guy, and he's placating to Europe, to Russia, to Turkey. Turkey seems very interested in coming down and owning all that, but Israel's just saying no. And I think between all the other news items, this has kind of got lost in translation, so to speak.
Well, Trump's owning the news cycle.
He's owning the news cycle.
Every day. He is just...
Whether it be selling watches or whatever.
He is mastering it. I mean, he is owning the news cycle.
And, I mean, is that purposeful? Is he giving a smokescreen to Israel?
Oh, sure.
Is he pulling the rug out from Europe and Russia, all these kinds of things, in order for Fruit Basket upset? We know in his real estate dealings, he would do that, right? He would do Fruit Basket upset, and that way, if he wasn't on top, he'd put everyone on the bottom, and then you have a better chance of climbing and winning the deal. And so he's kind of doing that, and it's very much put Turkey at odds with the Americans in Syria. Of course, Turkey is a NATO country, and so I just think it's amazing that in 1 month's time, when the Bible says Damascus is gone in a day, a ruinous heap, I do believe that's a day. I take the Bible literally. But 30 days to turn it around and make Damascus the front line of this thing is also something that I don't think anybody could have planned. I don't think anybody could say, this is what we're going to do. I mean, I'm not going to give the Jews credit or Mossad credit or HTS credit or Turkey credit. You can only give God credit here. The sovereign hand working in all kinds of individuals and nations. And the Fruit Basket upset just becomes something that now puts it in the news. And everybody would say then all the players of World War III are at the gates of Damascus. Right? Now, we know it's going to come down through the Jezreel Valley and down to Jerusalem and all that. But it certainly set the chessboard up. When you're going to play chess or something, you kind of set it up and you got first move, second move, and all that. And within a couple of moves, somebody's got initiative or someone's in check.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to note that, just like you see, not all the Islamic states really care for the Palestinians or are jumping to their defense.
Right.
And so all of the different Islamic leaders that you've had throughout, even the Crusades and all the way up through modern history, they have an interest in Damascus. And so someone's going to, whoever it's most beneficial to, is going to want it.
Yeah.
And we kind of assume that there's some kind of Islamic alliance.
Yeah.
But I think that's more shallow than...
It's a dream. It's always been there. They keep talking about it. Have you ever seen the movie? This is horrible. Lawrence of Arabia. It's an old movie from the 70s. Sir Laurence Olivier, whatever. And Lawrence of Arabia was a strange character. Some people say he was homosexual. Some people say he was a traitor to Britain, etc., etc. But nevertheless, he was central in fighting the World War I, pre-World War I battle against the Ottoman Turks, and he united some Arabian tribes and such with British backing. But you remember at the end of it, they all end up in Damascus, and there's all this hope, and everybody comes, and for 30 days they're trying to put Damascus back together, and they're all at the diplomatic table. Everybody ends up leaving because they can't do it. They fought this thing, they put it there, and then some people blame the British because the British were like, well, we were never going to really keep our word. We promised the Jews things, Arabs things, and ultimately we're still there with the British mandate. But so it's this kind of Gordian knot. Damascus is a Gordian knot that is hard to solve, hard to understand, hard to forecast. But the one forecast that the Bible puts forth, and even though it's in simplicity, the Bible Nation Society, we want to say, hey, we called it, God called it, Damascus is going to become a ruinous heap. It's going to be the front line, and that is a prophecy once fulfilled that starts the whole Armageddon theater, if you will. And we just think it's there somehow. Somehow it's on the cusp of what's going on, and I think it's tied to Gaza. So I wanted to bring up Gaza and Hezbollah, even though we're talking about Damascus, because you can't untie them from each other. Jackson, you were talking about the video from that Trump pushed. It's not like he made it, but he pushed it on his TikTok or something about the Riviera of the Mediterranean, Gaza, and how basically he's going to own it. He's a statue of gold there. He's the entrepreneur. It's him. It's like New Washington. It's like Washington D.C., but it's Trumpville. Sort of thing.
It looked like Nebuchadnezzar's statue, but of the Don.
Yeah, and they do have the coin with him and Cyrus, from Iraq or whatever. But will the ceasefire hold? It's definitely questionable. Will the hostages return? Are they even alive? And like President Trump said, President Trump, people think he's almost prophetic. They hate it, but he said there's going to be hell to pay. Hamas is going to be dead in a few hours, he said, right? All in the last few hours. And will there be war again? It seems like he's given the green light to Israel to just do whatever it is. In other words, the two-state solution's dead. It's going to be one state. Nobody will tolerate Israel ruling Gaza, therefore I'll rule it. That's kind of what he's saying. Several of the Gulf states are saying there is no alternative, that's it. Egypt has put forth an alternative where we'll rule it, but who knows if the Israelis will go for that, or even the Palestinians will go for that. And so somebody's going to have to shout louder than Trump, or people are putting faith in Trump, in that regards. And then there's Hezbollah. Hezbollah's drowning. Israel's done a tremendous job of just getting rid of them. And here they finally have their funeral services for Nasrallah. Did you see that? And while they're having funeral service for Nasrallah, the IDF is bombing Beirut all around it and has a flyover like you do at an NFL game. They do a flyover, 4-jet flyover of Nasrallah's funeral. And all the Hezbollah people are shouting and crying. And I don't know if it was you who told me, Jesse, that a lot of those people were brought in from Pakistan and Iraq. In other words, the people in Lebanon are like, we're not going to that. We're not going to become a target, for that or whatever. Somebody told me that was the case. It was a lot of fly-in Shiites who were loyal to that regard. But nevertheless, the new border is north of Israel at the Litani River. And the Lebanese army is supposedly there, not letting Hezbollah dig in again. And the new president is there, again, as an American proxy, American setup. He was pro-American in the army, and the Americans are now he's made some statements to try to be independent. But Hezbollah is drowning. Hezbollah is drowning. Gaza's about to turn over. Syria, Assad is gone. It's fruit basket upset. And Trump's still talking smack. And to me, it feels like, man, you're just talking smack. You're just a New York real estate agent. But, the Antichrist quotient is high. Whether it's him or not, God is doing things, the devil's playing chess. And so that brings me really kind of down to the important part of this is Damascus on the front line. And that is Greater Israel. And if you look online, there are flags and maps out there of Greater Israel that to some extent, go either all the way to the Euphrates, up in like Homs, Syria, and down to the Nile. To some extent, the Israeli people are we're tired of this. We're tired of being surrounded. We're tired of being besieged. We're tired of the two-state solution. It's going to be one Israel, a greater Israel, and we're going to be in control of these places. It's no longer going to be called the West Bank, right? It's going to be called Israel. It's going to be called Samaria and Judea. And of course, they've put a tank division in Samaria and said they're going to be there, and that hasn't happened for 20 some years.
Al Jazeera, reports Netanyahu will not allow forces of HTS organization or the new Syrian army to enter the area south of Damascus. But he goes on to say, Netanyahu also warned that Israel would not accept any threats to the Druze community in Syria who live in the Golan Heights.
That's huge.
I mean, that's where we were at.
That's huge.
In a Syrian territory illegally occupied by Israel and other parts of southwestern Syria.
Yeah, that's the press.
Yeah,
that's the press.
But that's where we were.
So those Druze in Israel are very loyal to Israel.
Right.
They joined the army. They're officers.
Cousins.
Yeah, and they're not really Muslims. They're kind of a strange, almost like the Alawites. They're kind of being reincarnation or something like that. But we were amidst them, and they are so hospitable. They're pro-West. They're Western in their kind of leaning, thinking, functioning, even though they have their own religious identity. Israel allows it, embraces it. Their soldiers can go to the military academy. They can become pilots, all this kind of stuff. And they have their own brigade, right? The Golani Brigade. A lot of Druzes up there. But there are Druzes across the border in Lebanon and Syria.
And so the important thing here is Netanyahu is not only making a geographical distinction.
Yeah.
He's not defending a line. Now he's assimilating a people.
Yeah.
And he's saying we're extending to the Druze are us.
Yes.
And so not Jews, it's Druze. Where they are, we're going to go to where they are. In other words, it's a cultural push into Syria.
Yes.
Because he's claiming all the Druze. Anywhere Druze are, that's ours. You can't touch them.
The Druze, when we were there, they claimed to be the biblical Kenites. Remember that? Kenites. And those became like brothers. Those became like cousins. In fact, when you're there, the Druzes will hug you and say, "We're cousins." We're cousins. Of course, they're trying to sell you something at the same time.
My cousin.
But so it's like the biblical cultural geography and cultural brotherhood is something he's grabbing onto. And most of the Druzes in these places are like, yes, we'd rather be. Now there's 3 counties south of Damascus. They want autonomy. And Israel's saying, we're going to give you autonomy, but we're going to protect you nationally. So it's kind of like grabbing 3 counties south of Damascus. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, I've been seeing some pictures that got their own kind of flag.
Yeah. It's multicolored.
Yeah.
You guys, I don't know if you guys remember, I brought a hat home. It was like a flat hat with multicolors, and it's the Druze. That's their Druze. And it's kind of one of their symbols of reincarnation as well. So, they're not someone that can be assimilated, but they're someone who can together join. So on the Lebanese side, Israeli side, and Druze side, they're one people, one culture. They'll join the military and serve under the Israeli flag. But it's amazing how that's in Genesis. God prophesies it. Whatever happens today, it's still there. And like Pastor Jay said, it's a cultural, it's not just a geographic line, it's a cultural line up to Damascus. And so it is altogether Genesis. And the Israelis are calling it the one-state solution. There's a great book by Caroline Glick, she's a journalist, and it's called One State Solution, where she, as more or less a secular person, it's not just religious Jews, it's secular Jews now as well. And so you've probably got 3/4 or more of Israel basically saying, now's the time, Assad's gone, God worked this miracle for us, God worked this miracle in Gaza, God put Trump in, let's jump on his coat sleeves, in that. I have heard Ben Shapiro be against Trump's Gaza plan. And so, not that I would send anybody to another podcast with Ben Shapiro, but he has his own strong Jewish nationalist reasons for not giving it to anybody. Israel should own that. But, again, Israel's son-in-law and daughter and grandkids are Jews, right? Converts. So, he can claim familial connections there. Jason, this is a verse you say a lot, even from the pulpit. Zechariah 12:2. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall when they shall be in the siege, both against Judah and against Jerusalem. And so, even America dealing with Jerusalem, it becomes a cup of trembling. It's a burdensome stone, Zechariah says, on anybody's head that wants to deal with it. And so Trump seems to want to deal with it.
Hey, just to catch up, Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem in his first term?
Yes.
Did Biden move it?
No.
No, so it's still there.
It's still there.
Yeah.
Biden used it, and he kind of gave Trump recognition for that and everything. Because even like Clinton and Carter, they'd all said, we're going to do it, but no one had ever done it.
Right.
The other thing that Trump did is he basically said the Golan Heights is not occupied territory, it's Israel. So now this time around, he's more or less saying, you guys take the West Bank, control the Litani River, control Damascus, connect with us. The only thing he's saying is, the deal is I get Gaza.
Well, and talking about the art of the deal.
Yeah.
So you have this Middle East negotiation going on concerning Gaza that involves Hamas and then
Hezbollah.
but then these other Middle Eastern nations like Syria, which then behind them is Russia, right?
Yep.
And then you have this other negotiation going on about Ukraine and Russia.
Yes.
Now Zelensky has nothing to do with this other thing,
Yeah.
but Trump has something to do with both,
Yes.
and so does Russia.
Yes.
And so someone,
Yes.
I bet you someone loses. It depends on which side Trump wants to win more on, and
Yes.
I kind of believe just in history's sake,
Yeah.
he would be willing to sell out the Ukrainians a little bit more to get something better over in Israel.
I think that's evident. I think that's evidently happening.
Yeah.
So he's, Zelensky's coming and signing and saying you can have 50% of
Yeah.
our rare metals.
Which side note, asterisk, watch Elon Musk because he operates in rare minerals, and so that's
space and batteries.
Yeah.
Well, then, and Putin actually is brilliant because Putin comes out and says, well, we have more than that and we'll sell it to you. And Trump says, yeah, we're going to buy that from the Russians. So, yeah, there's three-way dealing here, and it's kind of like 3D chess. Like there's chess games going on in the Middle East, in Europe, even here in the United States and all that kind of stuff. And so Trump, I think, is trying to play for the trifecta. He wants to be the man. And so it's important to recognize that and read between the lines because the media only just gives you barely the surface depending on who you're listening to. And but we know, like Pastor Jason said, that Jerusalem is the cup. And it's trembling right now. It is absolutely trembling because we got nuclear powers. Israel has nukes. Damascus could be gone in a day. It could become a ruinous heap. And not even with nukes. Look at Gaza. That's just conventional bombs. And look what they could do with conventional bombs in a day if they needed to. If something, what would happen that would become gone? What if Israel negotiated it as an international city, and now it's an international, city run, and the UN's there, and American presence is there, and more terrorists wanted to bomb it or something. So I think there's scenarios where not just Israel bombs Damascus, but that God says, all right, it's time. Once this happens, it's like pulling the pin on the grenade. Damascus being gone is pulling the pin on the grenade. The clock is ticking, so to speak. And so I bring that up because it's just barely hitting the news, but I think to our ears, it's very important in biblical culture to what's going on. Now, obviously, we love Syrians, Damascus, every tribe, creed, whatever. So we want to, like we said in the article, God has given them given Damascus the gospel from the beginning. So the gospel call has gone to Damascus with great grace for thousands of years, right? Connection even with Abraham for 1,800 years before that. But then at some point in time, their rejection brings down such a sledgehammer that it's gone and God is justified. And so you say, oh, that's cruel. You're such a hurt. No, that's just agreeing with God. That's just kind of understanding how gracious God has been. And then when the time comes, it is off. So I'm glad you brought that up, Jay, that this is more than just the Middle East. This is playing with Russia and Europe. And if you wanted to look farther east and go, say, to Saudi Arabia wants a pipeline that runs to the Red Sea, but not through the Suez Canal. It runs up through Eilat and out Israel. It's a safer place. And in fact, if it does that, where does it end up? It ends up in Gaza. And so Gaza becomes a oil output station for the Med and for all of Europe. Does that make sense? So Saudi's oil no longer has to be trucked, and it could come west rather than east. The Chinese need it, and the Chinese go and get it. But that's I think coming into play economically as well. And Trump knows that because above all things, he's going to play the dollar. And so MBS and the Saudis and the UAE have more or less kind of said what they had to say publicly, but played behind the U.S. and joining Israel because everyone's going to get rich, and the Gazans need to get out of the way as part of that. And the Europeans will benefit. Remember, the Europeans have been buying Russian gas, and they need to find another place, to get it cheap or whatever. So,
Well, like even in that cabinet meeting that Trump had yesterday, he's asked, "Are you going to force Russia to give concessions? They were the aggressor."
Yeah.
And obviously, he has to take a strong position, but he's like, "Can you make them leave?"
Yeah.
In other words,
yeah,
what he's communicating
We're
is,
not
"I'm not
going.
willing to send
troops.
in to make him leave." And the point being is, Trump doesn't negotiate from a position of like moral, who was right, who was wrong. He's negotiating from the point of view of who's powerful.
And what's it going to cost?
Right. He's bigger.
Yeah.
He won. Whether it was right or wrong morally for
Yeah.
him to evade another nation, and just looking at the chessboard, he is stronger. He can outlast the Ukrainians because we're not going to keep going. But if I can get something on the Israel side, my legacy is greater rebuilding
Yes.
Gaza than it is preserving Ukraine entirely.
Yeah.
I'll get enough kudos just to get him out of the war.
Yeah. So it's not even a chess game. It's not even a risk board. It's more like an Axis and Allies board. I mean, there's IPCs, there's industrial production going on across the table, and so Trump's playing big boy stuff here. And I do want to believe that it's America first. I do want to believe that he's going to back and support Israel in all this. But I guess I agree with Ben Shapiro a little bit in that Gaza shouldn't really be Trump's or America's, because it's a burdensome stone to own that. You know what I mean? The other thing is, if you look online, that's where Goliath, the giants, and the Nephilim, that's the area they're from. So it has this spiritual darkness implication as well. And there's a lot of prophecies about the destruction of Gaza. Mm-hmm. And so we're there. And so we really didn't bring that up because what's pertinent to our conversation is that all of a sudden the pin on the grenade, we're right there. There's a finger in the pin and it's about to be pulled. And so it's not like we're trying to call it or prophesy something that's not happening. We just think this is something that we should be looking at. We were looking at it a couple years back, but not in the same degree. I think the force of magnitude of looking at this has gone up times 3, as far as the importance of Damascus. So let us know what you think, pastors. Let us know what you think, Christians, church members, about Damascus. Do you have any more information? Send us the articles you have, and this will be something that we might return to.
Or if it's even on your radar map.
Yeah, yeah,
Are you even thinking about it?
yeah. Is it connected, or is it not important?
Yeah.
Let us know what
Or are
you
we
think.
crazy?
Are we just conspiracy theorists?
Yeah. Are we crazy? Is this nothing, or should we be looking here?
Folks,
Let us know.
the best culture is a Bible culture because it does business, it does foreign policy based upon the Bible. The best culture is a Bible culture. It's proven, and it works. Until next time, thank you.